Firefighters of Reddit, what's the stupidest way a person has started a fire? Rolled up to a 3-plex row of 2-story townhomes. The unit in the middle was blowing and going. By the time we put the fire out, there was a huge V pattern on the backside of the complex, meaning you could see where the fire started at about waist level near the rear wall, because everything above it was burned away upwards and outwards. Just completely cratered and gone in a V all the way up to the, now mostly missing, roof. Turns out the genius in the middle unit was trying to start his charcoal barbecue grill. Unfortunately, he didn't have any starter fluid, so he got the fantastic idea to use gasoline instead. Alas, the coals didn't completely catch the first time he lit them off, so he decided to pour on more gasoline out of the glass jar he was using to store it in. A spark in the coals leapt up the pouring gas into the jar. Said genius panicked and threw the jar directly at the wall of his townhome, where it exploded. Dipshit Molotov cocktailed his own home. When we rolled up our hoses and went back in service, leaving the scene in the capable hands of the investigators, the neighbors from either side were angrily and animatedly grouped up on the sidewalk out front, waiting for Captain Dumbness to return from the walk he had suddenly decided he needed to go on to clear his head. Had a guy last year that was driving down the highway while smoking. He went to flick the bit out the window, but it flew into his backseat where it started some crap back there on fire. Instead of pulling over, this Dumbness takes off his shorts and tries to put the fire out with them while still driving at highway speeds. It didn't go so well as he slid off the highway. FD showed up to this moron with his car burning and him standing there in his underwear. Coldest day of the year. -8, plus wind chill. Guy was trying to thaw a frozen water pipe in the basement using a blowtorch. Caught the wall on fire. Did not call 911 until the entire basement was on fire. Our chief was in the fire station, 1.5 blocks away, and by the time he was on scene, the first floor was burning. Spent 5 hours in the freezing cold, putting it out. I was on an attack line, kneeling on the sidewalk and spraying water into a second floor window. Mist was blowing back onto me from the water stream. Eventually, another firefighter relieved me so I could go to the rehab tent. I couldn't get up. I was frozen to the ground, and my arms had a layer of ice on them, so I couldn't bend them. We were still fighting it when the insurance adjuster arrived. Our assistant chief said, "So, do you know what started this fire?" The guy replied, "Yeah, but we insure for stupidity." Most of the fires I fought were electrical in nature, like old ventilation fans, or cooking fires, clogged dry vents, or actual arson. I did have one fire that started because someone wanted to dry their socks on an old space heater. I prevented a fire by telling a lady she shouldn't dry her socks by laying them on top of a light bulb. We were in her house looking for what she thought were snakes, which turned out to be squirrels. I told a gentleman in a hoarder house that if it caught on fire we wouldn't even attempt to come inside to save him, and he probably wouldn't be able to get out because of all the trash. He said his place wouldn't catch on fire anyways. To which I told him he just set a pile of clothes on fire, which I immediately extinguished with my foot, while he tried to drop his cigarette into a coffee can. Working 4th of July a few years ago. Several kids and their friends, age ranges varied from approximate 8 to 15, were home alone, while the mother of the kids who lived in the apartment was at a BBQ. Kids had the idea to start playing with a lighter that they had found in one of the bedrooms. After lighting a cardboard box on fire, they panicked and shoved it under the bed. By the time we were dispatched, fire was blowing out the 2-bedroom windows and had progressed into much of the apartment. Luckily they all made it out of the apartment safely, as did the tenants in the first floor unit. 2-family house split between first and second floor. Mother arrives on the scene around the time that we are finishing up with overhaul. Rather than show concern for her kids and their friends for their safety, she proceeds to scream at them in the street in front of the crowd of people that had gathered for ruining her night with her friends. I have firefighters in the family. My favorites. An old couple's home. The husband decided it would be a good idea to turn on an empty hot tub in their sunroom with no water, then leave the room. The wife goes, "Honey, there's smoke coming from the hot tub." Husband ignores her. Then she says, honey, there's flames coming from the hot tub. He finally decides to call 911. And their house was considered a total loss by the end. A woman spent all day sitting on a chair in her living room smoking and surrounded her chair with a dozen trash cans to throw her cigarette butts in. Well, one day one of the trash cans caught fire. She made it out. A small shed caught fire and the fire company chief was the first to arrive at the scene in the chief's truck. Instead of attempting to put out the fire himself, it was a small fire and he had a fire extinguisher on the truck. He parked across the street and waited for the rest of the crew to arrive, at which point the fire grew so big that it spread to the next door neighbor's house and engulfed it. I remembered another one. An autistic child who was being neglected was starving, so he tried to make mac and cheese but didn't put any water in the pot, which started a fire. They made it out okay, but one of the firefighters made the fire much worse than what it was because he busted out almost every window with an axe, this further fueling the fire. They know he did this because he filmed it on his helmet cam and posted it on Facebook. I once shared a flat with a guy who'd been a firefighter and was suffering for it mentally. I was young at the time and I didn't really understand what was happening, but looking back I now understand he was suffering from PTSD and was drinking heavily to try and cope with it. Anyway, one of the fires that haunted him was an extremely overweight man that had been smoking in bed and fell asleep. He dropped his cigarette into the bed, which caught fire. Presumably the smoke quickly overcame him, but it smoldered for hours before it was discovered. Apparently the guy had basically melted. Be nice to your firefighters, they see things people shouldn't even have to see. A dude got wasted drunk, put a pot full of water on to boil so he could make some corn. Falls asleep, water boils off and starts heating up this pot. Smoke begins to fill the apartment building. Smoke detectors going off and everyone else is evacuated by the time we get there, except Drunky McDrunkerson. He's still passed out inside his apartment and won't answer his locked door. That's okay. Firefighters love breaching doors and generally ucking stuff up. We make forced entry and he's sleeping away on his couch while the smoke alarms scream. He was able to walk out of the apartment, hunched under the worst of the smoke, and everyone was fine. Journalist. A methed out couple with 2 kids lived in a 1970s mobile home. The water pipes froze, so they decided to thaw them with blowtorches. It worked really well, in fact. In their psychosis they set the paneling around the pipe on fire, which torched the trailer. When the FD pulled up, they were running into the trailer to save their meth lab and load it into the neighbor's truck. So not only did they lose their home, but they lost their kids and were taken to jail on multiple felonies. Kids are fine. The parents should be coming up on their release day in a year or so. As 99% of this thread, not a firefighter. I did house cleaning for a lady who owned apartment buildings, and she came in furious one day because a girl living in one of her apartments had forgotten her laundry room key. So she decided to burn down the door which was attached to the building she lived in. This was midday and she was sober. It didn't turn out well. Not a firefighter. I had a lit candle in my bathroom by the sink. My friend came over for dinner and somehow in the process of peeing she took off her sweater and threw it on the candle and forgot about it. I smelled smoke when she came out, so I went to check the candle. Her sweater was on the counter, fully engulfed in flames. I used a spoon, happened to walk in holding the spoon I was using to cook dinner, to poke the flaming sweater into the sink and put out the fire. Sadly, this isn't unexpected for her. She is the single most oblivious human being alive. It's astounding. She has zero awareness of her surroundings. I fear the day she moves out of her parents' house and into her own apartment, she's going to accidentally kill herself somehow. I guarantee it. I have a few, but I'll just leave 2 here for your perusal. One gentleman who was older and lived by himself in an apartment complex was making himself dinner one evening consisting of a couple of boiled hot dogs. Puts them on the stove, fires everything off, goes and sits on the couch to watch some TV whilst the dogs cook. He woke up to the fire alarm going off and his apartment filled with smoke. After clearing out the smoke with our fans, it was noted that all 6 of his hot dogs had been reduced to a very small, black, burnt pile. Another time, There is a 8 apartment building with a very large attached deck in the rear. The deck was 2 stories to match the apartment structure and had 2 sets of steps. A couple of grills were present on each of the 2 levels and some cheap furniture. During the night, the first level was known as a homeless gathering point, where the homeless would come and set up bedding and such semi out of the element for the night. This one particular night, a few homeless were sleeping there, and one of them decides they are going to light up a cigarette. He eventually throws the nub away and goes back to sleep. The nub landed near a pile of trash that included an old mattress, starting it on fire. By the time we were dispatched, the entire deck structure was engulfed, and a column of some could be seen from several blocks away at 2 AM. We arrived, put everything out, and followed the investigation after, only to find out it was a simple cigarette. Got called for a smell of smoke at a residence in an older but nice house. It was a beautiful spring day around noon. No smoke, no fire, but a definite odor that was difficult to pin down. After searching and sniffing for a while, we nakeded it down to the upstairs bathroom. We found that a convex mirror that was mounted to the wall had reflected sunlight onto a point in the bathroom windowsill. It had charred an arching line in the wood about 4 inches long, tracing the movement of the sun. It never caught fire, and I'm not sure it ever would have, but it gave the homeowner peace of mind to find the source. That's it for today. Do all the YouTube stuff, and if you like firefighter stories, check out this video.